Hello, scholars. My name is Ira McIntosh, and this is Hypothesis. Hey everyone, welcome back to my office. It's time for another podcast episode, and today's guest it was a breath of fresh air. It was so great to talk to this guest about their experiences with education outside of working in higher ed. We talked about gentrification of neighborhoods and how students' cultural backgrounds influence how they learn. And how they're penalized for having those cultural backgrounds. We're also talking about how the public school system was set up not only to benefit those who come from affluence, but was designed to create factory workers, and how it is now failing everyone, not just students of color, not just students who don't come from certain economic backgrounds. It's failing everyone. So I really hope you take the time to listen to this podcast in its entirety. I think it's a really important conversation to have, and I'm so glad that educators are having this conversation, and that my guest is researching ways to make public schools more accessible to all students. Today's guest is Kelcey Anyá. Kelcey is a multidisciplinary performing artist, arts administrator, and passionate advocate for equitable education. Originally from Houma, Louisiana, I hope I said that right, she began her journey on stage at just 2 years old as a dancer, and from that moment forward, the stage became her home. Her motto has always been, "As long as I can touch the stage, I'm happy." Kelcey holds an MA in Theater, Performance, and Practice with certificates in both teaching and women's gender and sexuality studies from Miami University, Ohio, as well as an MEd in Curriculum and Instruction Leadership from Liberty University. With over 30 years of dance experience and 20 years of acting, Kelcey brings a unique blend of artistic excellence and educational insight to every space she enters. Her transition from performer to educator began in New York City in 2019, where she merged her love for storytelling and education as a teaching artist. Since then, she has held impactful roles, including director of Colt Core Theater Company's annual education initiative in NYC, program manager at Pegasus Theater in Chicago, community engagement associate and teaching artist at the Joffrey Ballet in Chicago, school programs and teacher development manager at Goodman Theater in Chicago, and director of programs at Project Create Arts Center in Washington, D.C. Through these roles, Kelcey has witnessed firsthand the power of the arts as a vehicle for learning, healing, and access. Her work centers on creating inclusive, empowering educational environments, especially for students from historically underserved communities. Her personal and professional journey has shaped a core belief: every child deserves access to a rich, creative, and culturally responsive education. Kelcey believes that the arts are not just enrichment, they are essential. And if little 2-year-old Kelcey in her tap shoes could see her now, she'd smile knowing that her love for dance would one day fuel a life's mission rooted in joy, justice, and transformative education. So please join me in welcoming and just taking peace in knowing that there are intelligent people out here researching education and better ways to do it. Please welcome Kelcey Anyá. I really don't understand why everyone is so obsessed with video, but I'm happy to give people what they want.
Yep.
I'm a people pleaser.
Unless.
My therapist loves it for me because it keeps me coming back.
Keeps her pockets paid.
Uh-huh. So right up here at the top, what I read through your bio and it made me very happy because I see a kindred spirit in someone who does one thing and then it's like, you know what? We're gonna change this completely and try something new. Could you tell me a little bit about this education journey and how you got where you are?
That is hilarious. Yeah. Cliff Notes version. So I am a actor both by trade and education. Got a master's in theater, have been performing my whole life, moved to New York City, was actually doing pretty great for myself. And then we hit a global pandemic 5 months later.
Woo.
And that required me to lean on other skills that I have. So I've always been like an educator, but who hated the education system. Like I
Mm.
have always absolutely hated the bureaucracy around our education system. So me being a teacher was never going to happen. Like that was never going to be a thing. And so I was like, but if I could find other ways to like teach, especially in the arts, I would do it. And so my mentor who had just finished her leg of her career in New York and had moved back and ended up being a professor at where I got my master's from, was like, oh, when I was in New York and I needed to make money in between shows, I was a teaching artist.
Mhm.
And I was like, oh, that's a thing. Like I had no idea. And she was like, yeah, here are the companies that I worked for, but there are hundreds around the city. Like find one and go teach dance, go teach theater. And I was like, okay, cool. And so in doing that, I started doing that just to have a couple extra bucks in my pocket right before the pandemic happened. And so I was
Mm.
teaching in Manhattan, the Bronx, and in Brooklyn. And I was
Wow.
like, yeah, yeah, those commutes were fun.
Living on the train, you mean?
Literally living on the train because that 2 hour commute each way to the Bronx was joyful after opening at Starbucks at 4 a.m. It was great. It was amazing. Be an actor, kids. It's fun. And so I realized, but one of the things that stood out to me was like just the difference in the quality of schools when I was in the Bronx versus when I was in Brooklyn and where I worked in Brooklyn, and especially the programs that I was working with in Manhattan. And so I was like bothered by it. I was also bothered by the fact that it took me either a very long bus ride or an expensive Uber just to get back to the train because it was so far away from the school. And once daylight savings times hits, by the time I leave school at 4:30, it's dark. And I
Yeah.
like did not want to walk in the Bronx. It's not my block by myself. Like, don't know anything. It's not safe. And it just bothered me for my kids. Like it
Mm.
bothered me for my students who are also leaving at 4 p.m. in the dark by themselves at 12. And I was like, this is crazy. There's so much environmental racism. There's like so much stuff happening here. But I was still going to be an actor. Like I was still doing the things. Pandemic hit and I had to make a pivot. And so I was
Mhm.
like, okay, I can teach. So like let's lead into people who are trying to do virtual theater and do virtual things. And I was doing virtual shows. That was not fun. So I was like, okay,
Yeah,
let's
it was a weird
it
moment.
was a weird, it was such a weird time. Like I never need to do another Zoom play ever. And
Oof, no.
and so I kind of just started reaching out to people with education programs, blah, blah, blah. And I started teaching virtually. And then I realized, oh, this pandemic thing is a thing. Like we are still inside and it is 6, 7, 8 months later. Girl, you can't be making minimum wage. You need a job with a salary. And so I ended up working for an arts education company as a program manager, got to create programs for them, things like that. And I just had really amazing, really bright kids who just had like it was unfortunate circumstances when it came to access. And it made me aware of the privilege that I had to have a mom who fought for me to make sure I got what I needed because the access wasn't there for me either. She went find it and made sure that I got it. And everyone just did not have that ability, like does not have
Yeah.
that privilege. And so I ended up moving to Chicago. And when I was in Chicago, I did more teaching artistry, more things. And I kind of just I chased the paper and I ended up an associate director of a theater company, like an education program of a theater company.
Oh my
And
god.
yeah, I just wanted to get paid more and I was really good at what I was doing. But I decided to go get a master's in education because I felt like I inherently was good at teaching, but I didn't have like the pedagogy and things behind what I knew to be true. And I fully recognize that people like status. They like the paper. They like knowing that you know what you're talking about, even though you know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And so I was like, Found a 1-year program. It was super inexpensive. I went ahead and applied for it. I got in. I literally started 2 days later because I literally applied right before the semester started. And I ended up applying for that job at that theater. And the degree they were looking for was the exact master's degree that I was getting. And that job had been open for months. They could
Oh,
not find
wow.
anybody that was both an artist and had the education background that they wanted. And so when I applied, I had seen it, didn't apply, seen it, didn't apply. Finally tried to apply and had the job within 2 weeks' time.
Wow.
And I found out it was largely because, like, yeah, you were great, but you had the education background that we were looking for. Because a lot of artists love what they do and they're happy to teach it, but they don't understand the nuances behind it. That is what got me, like, for real into the education side of things. I now live in the DMV. I took a job in DC as a director of an arts program, and an arts a nonprofit. It was the worst thing that I've ever done in my life. I was there for all of 6 months, and then I got the heck out of there. So I uprooted my entire life for nothing. But it definitely made me even more aware of the discrepancies that were available. It's in Ward 8, in DC on the southeast side. Ubers don't even like picking you up after it gets dark over there. Like, it is not the best place to be in. And I just saw how much things were beyond these kids' control. How much was just like, this is just not fair. Like, their
Yeah.
resources are just not there. Their access is just not there. But the gentrification was so high in that area as well. They put in new high-rise apartments that were hiking up the rent of people who lived there. Even the organization that I worked for just signed for a multi-million dollar facility to be building and expanding their project. And on one end, I'm like, that's amazing. And on another end, I'm like, you are gentrifying the heck out of this neighborhood. And I don't know what's going to happen to these families of
Yeah.
these kids, first of all. And secondly, you might now have the kids from Noma who are well privileged wanting to come because of the state of the art facility and pushing out the kids who it was always intended for. If you're not intentional about making sure that there are programs that continue to support the kids that this program was always for to begin with. And so that is kind of how I, like, very fluently moved into education. It really started with a pandemic. Your girl needed money. And I was like, I'm good at education. That's cool. And then I was reminded how much I hated our education system. And then I was like, let's do something about it.
Yeah. Well, and when I lived in New York, I think there's this mindset that people have that in these large cities, especially the coastal cities like New York and Seattle and LA, that there is access to everything and everyone can do anything because it's a liberal coastal city. But that I moved to New York and I lived in Flatbush for my first year there.
Yeah.
And I was right off the Newkirk Avenue stop on the 2 train. And
Uh,
2 stops later, the train ends. And then there's a bus, and then that bus ends. And then there's East New York, and there are still thousands of people that live out there. And
yes.
it's like, so then how are they supposed to get access to literally anything?
Yeah.
In the biggest city in the US,
Yes.
it's considered the wealthiest city in the US. It's the most expensive to live in,
Yeah.
and you would assume there would be the most access, especially to education and transportation and groceries and all of these just basic necessities. But then you get off the train and you're like, oh, there's a Target, and then there's nothing.
Nothing. And then there's literally just, there's nothing. Yeah.
And it's wild. It's wild. And
Yeah.
these kids are on trains for hours every day.
Hours. Hours. They're taking multiple buses to get to where they need to go so that they can be at a somewhat better school.
Mhm.
And it's like these, do you have time to be a kid? Do you?
No, I was scared of some of those New York kids because they were more adult and more with it than I was. And I was just sitting in the corner of the train, like, please don't hurt me.
Yeah, that's fair. And I'm like, life comes at them hard. Um, and it's just like the getting on the bus and seeing a 5-year-old's mom put him on the bus, tell the bus driver where he goes to school and leaving him
Yeah.
was insane. was insane. And like, I know people have their qualms about New York. Generally, New Yorkers are actually not as mean as people think they are. They just mind their own business.
No.
They
Yeah.
literally just mind their own business. But when it comes to kids, like everybody in that bus was gonna make sure that kid got to school.
Yeah.
Like the whole neighborhood was making sure that baby got to kindergarten. But it was just like the fact that mom had to go to work. So mom
Mm,
couldn't even take you down the street, however many stops to get off. The bus driver had to know to stop because
yeah.
you can't even reach the thing to pull it. Like it is just, it was really unfortunate to witness so much potential be squandered by external factors, or
Mm,
my students just not feeling like they could do the thing, like watching them self-sabotage because they didn't feel like they would ever be able to achieve whatever was before them. And it was absolutely gut-wrenching. And I was like, now I need to save the world. Great, cool.
so then that all took you to now you're working on your PhD.
Yes.
And what is your topic like currently? Because I know it will shift over the next years, but like currently, what is your topic and how are you trying to address this problem through your
Yeah.
research?
Yeah, so we're hoping we don't change too much more. I will be ABD by the end of the year. So we gotta solidify some things. You're gonna start doing research next year. But I'm looking at one of the biggest answers to these discrepancies that I've noticed, the conversation has been school choice. And
Mm,
there's always been a part of me that really hated school choice, and I couldn't figure out why I hated school choice. Like it was giving No Child Left Behind, but everyone was getting left behind. But I couldn't
mhm,
articulate why I just was not a fan of school choice. And then because I was also like, is it a choice if you don't have the resources to go? Is it a choice if the school has to choose you back? Like these are
mhm,
private schools with admissions requirements. Is it actually a choice?
yeah.
No. And so I started looking deeper into it. I was witnessing conversations because this is a very much a hot topic now, and a lot of things about school vouchers came up.
Mm,
And I was like, okay, theoretically, this isn't a bad thing until I started doing the research on why school vouchers started in the first place. And I was like, oh, this is systemic racism in America. Here we go again. And so my research topic specifically, I don't think that voucher programs are inherently bad. I think we need to be very conscious about the historical elements that are in it and really making sure we are intentional about uprooting the real reason why voucher programs started in the first place. And so what I'm looking at is how the different structural designs. There are several school voucher programs, and that's the challenge with us having education being by state and not federal. And which you can make an argument for either side. I'm not here to convince people one way or another, but I'm looking at how do the structural differences and how these designs are um created and then implemented influence the academic outcome of Black students who stay in public schools. Because a lot
mm,
of the research that they use to push this and say that it's great and it's amazing is only looking at the kids who say yes to it, have the resources
interesting.
to say yes, who have the ability to say yes and participate in the program. 90% of the research on school voucher programs is only looking at the kids who took the voucher
Mm,
and the impact that it's had on their academic success. What they're not looking at is what happens to the public education in that same district that is now competing against another these school vouchers. They're not looking at the academic outcomes of the students who, for whatever the reason may be, have to stay at their public school.
mhm,
And even more so, it's not disaggregated by race because the
yeah.
impact of the education system by it's obviously different depending on socioeconomic status, race, urban versus rural, all of those things play a factor in, and no one's looking at public schools at all, and then they're also not digging any deeper. The most recent article, which is the one that I sent you, I want to say was like 2008. Like it was not um even that long ago. Yeah, 2008. That someone actually looked at public schools. Like it's still
Mhm.
very recent. So that's what I'm looking at. I want to see what the influence of designs are on Black kids who stay at public schools.
Well, and the article that you sent me talking about that was looking at the voucher system. And it was interesting to me because I was born in 1990. So I remember just always having heard about the voucher system because it started in 1990. So
Yeah.
I never knew a world where that wasn't an option and it wasn't just how things worked. Are
Yeah.
have you so far found any information comparing pre-voucher systems to post-voucher systems?
So the irony of that is I was born in 1991 and did not hear about voucher programs until I was well into my 30s.
And I
Um,
wonder why that might have been.
as someone who grew up in rural Louisiana, like
Mm,
I'm a Black woman
yep.
who grew up in the country in Louisiana, and I didn't know voucher programs were a thing. I'm literally proving my own point by my existence.
Yeah.
um, and so Louisiana, I don't remember. I looked it up what year they got voucher programs, and then how it's expanded it now. And so all I did was public school education. We had public school, we had private schools. You had money to pay private school tuition, or you went to public school. You had scholarships to
Mhm.
go play sports at the private schools, or you went to public schools. It's just what it was. And because I grew up in Louisiana, private schools didn't exist. Catholic schools existed.
Mhm.
There weren't really private schools that weren't religious schools. So I
Mm.
had friends who were like, who all the rich kids went to the Catholic school, regardless of their religion, except for the handful of rich Jehovah Witnesses who were like, we're not going to Catholic school, so we're going to send their kids to public school. Um, that was literally my experience. I had one friend who was a country club kid, and I was like, how did you end up in public school? I remember asking her that because I never knew anybody at her family's socioeconomic status who went to public school. And she was like, I'm Jehovah Witness. They're not sending me to Catholic school. And I was like, fair enough. And we went to school together from eighth grade till we graduated.
Yeah.
And so that wasn't my experience. I didn't know a world where voucher programs. I didn't know that exists. When I found out Milwaukee's program was 1990 or 1991, I was like, the very first one happened when I was born. For all intents and purposes, I should have known
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
my entire education, and I didn't. And I can say that I believe that that is still the case for many because a lot of these programs focus on urban areas.
Mm.
And so I remember, and I didn't know that this was school choice at the time, but I remember the city of New Orleans. Those kids could go to school anywhere in the city as long as they could get there. And they got into the school, of course, but they were able to go anywhere. They were not held to their neighborhood school. Me, my dad lived in one district, my mom lived in another. If I stayed at his house, I couldn't tell anybody because that would get in trouble for not being in the district that my school was in. Like, so it was a
That's
very
so
different
that's
experience.
so wild to me considering the public school system in the US was founded to make sure that kids in rural areas were educated. So
Mhm.
then why are we all of a sudden leaving them behind when that was literally what the whole thing was intended to do?
Yep,
That's wild to me.
it is. And I am really intentional in my research about acknowledging the fact that you cannot talk about the education system and even offer solutions today without acknowledging its history.
Mm.
And acknowledging that like it's not that long ago, my grandmother went to segregated schools.
Yeah.
Like it's not that long ago. I talked to her the other day. She's alive and well. So it's not, but we want to act as though it was a very, very long time ago. Ruby Bridges is 3 years younger than my grandmother and integrated in the same state that she was in. So it's like you can't separate the atrocities of history
Yeah.
that show up in it. And that is the thing with voucher programs. Voucher programs started because a bunch of white people had their panties in a bunch about desegregation. And the policymakers at the time were like, I don't want to deal with these angry mob of white people. I'm going to give them vouchers so that they can afford to send their kids to the private school that they cannot pay tuition at, so that we can have our own form of segregation. To this day, North Carolina's school choice program is affectionately known as segregation academies in 2025 because it is still incredibly segregated.
Well, then I'm sure a huge reason for that is because when there is research into these programs and there's official documents that are created documenting these systems and how they function, they purposefully leave race out of the equation, and they don't look at those things. I've found that in my own research, that no matter what I'm researching, there's always this little caveat at the end of every literature review that's like, oh, we didn't take into any consideration race, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's
Yeah.
like, well, when are we going to start asking those questions? Because
Yeah.
they're necessary for this information.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like it is evident that they don't want to look into that because it exposes the cracks
Mm,
in their system. If we really broke down school vouchers, school choice, and disaggregated it by race, by gender, and by region, there would be no argument for it.
mm-hmm.
There would be no legitimate argument for it,
Yeah.
in the grand scheme of things, and it is a level of privilege that is absolutely ridiculous when I'm like, the reason they're like, "Well, these kids are doing really well who go there." Statistically, they're not. There is actually not even a statistically significant difference between the kids who
Mm-hmm.
stay in public schools who have public schools that have resources and choose to be in
Mm-hmm.
the program. So one could deduce that the common denominator is resources, not it being a private school. If you put that money that you're taking away from these schools back into the schools, you pay the teachers, you upgrade the facilities, you give them books that are less than 50 years old, and you put college readiness advisors into these schools, they would have the exact same results because it's not about the private school. It's literally about the resources.
Yeah. One of the things I was wondering as I read the article that, or the paper that you sent me, was, has there been any research into the culture shock that the students go through when they go from that public school to the private school? Say they use that voucher, they go to that private school. Has there been any research into how that actually affects them socially, and how that social change affects their learning?
Yeah, not really. A lot of people, and I've had this fight as a scholar myself, like when it comes to policy, the way these people don't want you to do qualitative research, they only
Mhm.
want you to focus on numbers. It is incredibly frustrating. And as someone who understands that a student of color or a student of a low socioeconomic status failing has very minimal to do with their IQ or intellectual ability and everything to do with the external factors, it is frustrating that there are not conversations and research that is going into these social aspects of it. Now, what I have come across are scholars who'll be like, yeah, we started with, I don't know, 80 kids this one year. We're going to watch them for 2 years, but we ended with 47 because a bunch left, but we don't know why. They went back to public schools, but we don't know why.
We don't know
And
why. There were 80 students. That's an easy thing to track.
like, what? And they're like, yeah, they left. So this is what we deduced from the kids who stayed. And they don't touch the reasons why the kids left. They literally just say they left. So our research, our conclusions are now based off of the 47 that remained instead of the original 80 that we started with.
That feels like an entire data set that is important.
Yep. 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 I don't disagree with you. And I'm like, I'm sorry, what? Like, oh yeah, we started with 25 kids. We only have 17 because 8 of them left. Why? We don't know. We
Yeah.
didn't track them. They just when we went back the next year, they weren't enrolled anymore. So you don't know if they failed out. You don't know if something happened to them. You don't know if they left because of the social climate that was in there. You literally don't know anything. Some of the research has talked very briefly about the harshness of discipline that does
Mm,
cause kids to leave. It's minimal, but there is some because you think about you've now taken an urban kid into an affluent area and they're driving down the street and getting pulled over now. because they don't look like they belong in that neighborhood when they were just leaving football practice.
Yeah.
You have teachers and administrators who are issuing significantly harsher punishments for being teenagers in school. And these things are said as one-offs. They're not looked at holistically. They're not looked at in a way that examines how um the impacts and the effects and the of all of the things socially as it relates to the students. And I will say, and I don't know if it's just my school or if it's the field, I want to venture to say it's the field, but there is a push for you to look at numbers and numbers only. Case in point, I have 3 quant classes and only 1 qual class. 3.
That hurts my soul.
I am in one now. I have another one that starts on Monday. I have one more at the beginning of the fall semester, all before I can even take my qual class. And
Well,
so,
I mean, that to me speaks to a deeper issue within academia in general, where we've been so focused on STEM for so long that we've forgotten the qualitative things in education, the arts, the creativeness, the social aspects, the need for gym, because it's not just making kids go outside and play. That's when the kids are getting their social needs met and figuring out how to talk to each other and growing as a community. That's there's And then as we're writing papers, there's this overbearing need to find strict numbers and sciences and these things. And I'm not saying those are bad, but it's the pendulum has swung so far that we've forgotten that individual experiences are also important. I mean, as someone who has chosen ethnography as my like kind of overarching way of looking at life, um it hurts me to see these things where you could just ask someone a question and their lived experience is their lived experience, and it is research to find that experience and to write it down and then to start tracking a community's worth of experiences. And then all of a sudden, hey, guess what, now you have data that you can use and that you can follow further.
yeah, I completely agree with you. And that is 2 things. One, I submitted an assignment not that long ago. I think it was like 2 assignments ago where I was asked specifically to talk about like what is your problem statement? What is your hypothesis? What are you thinking? Blah blah blah. And for this stats class, and was basically told, great, but remember this is a quant class. And I was like, you asked about my research. You asked about what I
Mm-hmm.
want to look at. I'm telling you what I want to look at. And there is a quantitative aspect of it, but it is a mixed method. Like this is what but my feedback was literally, this is great. This is a quant class. So this is the mindset that people have going in when it comes to a lot of education. They want to look at number, they want to look at data. You brought up us being STEM focused, and the reason school vouchers shot back up in popularity was after A Nation's at Risk was written. And that particular article was basically highlighting how far behind we have fallen in education behind other countries, and namely behind China and Russia. And that terrified the United States. And so that is where our STEM focus came from. And that push for removing all of the social aspects from school, that push for standardized testing being the marker of success, where the push for teaching to test as opposed to teaching to comprehension became the focus of it. And if you want to really get into the deep dive of it, school was always created as it in the United States for what the way white men thought, the way
Mm-hmm.
that they structured their lives, the way that they processed information. It was never meant for women, it was never meant for people of color. So if you're going back to teaching to test, and this is a hyper generalization because at this point I don't even think white men think the way that they did back then, but it is because there's so much now. But if you're thinking about it in that way, it was never meant for the success of kids of color. And then you bring in these voucher programs where like, oh, our public schools are failing to achieve the test scores that we want, to make our kids competitive against these competing nations. So let's create
Mhm.
these voucher programs that at least gives them an opportunity for a better education. No, you're giving them an opportunity to become a robot.
Yeah. No, and quite literally that in that so my mother was a teacher in the Seattle Public School District for a very long time. And so from an early age, I was being told what the education system was built to do, what the curriculum was built to do, and that was post World War One, the United States said, "Oh no, we could go to another giant war like this. We need a population that can work in factories and not question authority." And so they reformulated the entire public school system and the curriculum to really focus on authoritarian knowledge, to memorization of basic concepts, to standardized testing, to make sure that they had a population that, in the event of war, they could say, cool, you now have to go sit on that assembly line and churn out fighter planes. That's all we need from our people, which makes sense with what you were saying about following up with Russia and following up with China, because those are two countries that are also very well known to have war economies.
Yep.
And so our system was never intended, post World War One, was never intended to create thinking people who could
Right.
find creative ways through problem solving and create a better nation or create a global community, which is what a lot of us are trying to change things to now and say, let's learn how to ask questions. It was created to make sure they didn't ask questions.
It's exactly what it was. It was created so they didn't ask questions. And then you bring in a culture of people who are insanely resilient,
Hmm.
obviously, and who learn differently, who
Hmm.
operate differently. My first master's in theater, my research, I wrote a one-woman show. And what I ended up exploring was the way that Black women's lived experiences are research.
Mm.
And I when I I went to a PWI, a lot of things had to change, but my initial desire was to have a cast of Black women who were bringing to life the stories of other Black women. And I ended up
Mm.
having to pivot because of resources into this solo show, but the foundation of it was you can't argue with a lived experience. Stop trying.
Yeah.
Um, just because it didn't come from a textbook written by a dead white man doesn't mean that it's not research, it's not valid, and it should not be used to inform future decisions. And I'm
Yeah.
seeing that still come up now, where it's like, no, these lived experiences of these youth, these situations that they're in, the environmental, social impacts of the areas in which they live in, all influence what um, should influence what policies are put in place to support them, first and foremost, but it influences the outcome, because of the lack of resources that are available. And I don't think school voucher programs are going to go anywhere. They're over 30 years old and they're just expanding more. I think right now 19 states now have voucher programs. And that means we have to make sure that we are implementing these programs in a way that truly helps all of the children the way that people are attempting to assume that they will.
So then, as you're embarking now on the research part of your studies, what are your kind of overarching questions? What are the things that you're really hoping to answer through this study?
I am genuinely curious whether or not the type of voucher program makes a difference.
Mm.
Um, because it's easy to be like, all voucher programs are great, or to be like, all voucher programs suck. I'm genuinely curious because almost every state has a different program. And it's
Mm.
this idea that, we're catering to the state's needs. What do the people of our state need? And I think when education first started, that makes sense. That made sense. Like I think it was South Dakota that fought against the Supreme Court to adjust, be able to adjust the amount of hours that their kids were in
Mm,
school because they needed them in the fields. They
yeah.
needed them, so they needed to not be bound to what could happen on the East Coast in
Hmm.
terms of the school day. Things like that made sense at a time. In
Yeah.
2025, is there that vastly of a difference when it comes to how education should go about within the
Yeah.
states, right? And because voucher programs are the big hot topic, and there's also a part of me that's like, I am a Christian. I am a believer. I don't rock with the way that these people be doing the things. And it's a lot of evangelicals that are pushing it. And so, quite frankly, I love disrupting like
Yeah.
ideologies when it comes to certain things that are not actually biblically sound.
Yeah.
But there's also a part of me that like would love to flip a table on this whole conversation
Yeah.
when it comes to um equity and access as someone who claims to actually follow the things of the Bible. And so there's this like other part of me that's like, I just want to flip tables. I just want to be able to prove that this is completely asinine, what you guys
Hmm.
are arguing. I'm also curious to use this to kind of as a gateway to figure out what do our kids of color actually need.
Mm,
My obvious focus is on Black students, but I know that it's not just them. And so, how do we educate all of our students? Because the needs are different. The needs are
yeah.
different, and one could argue that's why we tried separate but equal, but it wasn't equal. Um, and the question always comes up: if it was equal, would it have been fine?
Mm.
Yes, the needs are different. Like,
I
and I'm
mean,
not
that's
pushing for segregation, but
no. That's a question that I've always wondered is not purposefully keeping people in specific schools, but if we allowed communities to be able to learn together or communities to be able to be together, how would that shift learning? Because I mean, as someone with a Jewish background, there's a huge Jewish neighborhood, multiple Jewish neighborhoods in New York. So what would happen if that group of people who learn in a specific way have a specific shared
right,
history, and you could teach them in a way that relates to their shared knowledge, how much quicker would they learn things than if you're forcing a Catholic and a Jew and all
yeah,
of these people to learn
yeah.
together when they don't necessarily have that same shared experience.
Right. No, I completely agree. And it is about how you teach, right? Like I have
Hmm.
been blessed to teach in a multitude of spaces, and I fully recognize that I'm a very palatable person. And so until you think I am, people think I'm sick. And I love that for me because then they find out maybe not so much. But at this point, it's too late. You already let me in. Thanks. And so I have, because of that, though, I have been in rooms with some of the most affluent children I have ever experienced. And I have been in the room with some of the poorest kids I've ever experienced. And it's hard to separate socioeconomic from race.
Hmm.
So I specifically talk about their socioeconomic status, but there were only sprinkles of anything that wasn't Black or wasn't white in those two spaces. And how I deliver has to change based on the room that I'm in, but I have an awareness of this. In a past life, I
And
worked in
that's that theater training.
exactly. In a past life, I worked as an admissions counselor, and I would travel all over and go to schools and talk about my very privileged, very white PWI that I went to. And I had a great time there because I knew how to leverage the resources that were given to me. I understand why some students of color, especially Black kids, do not have a great time at my institution. Everyone's experience is different. But my point is, I would go to a very affluent white private school and walk into the school. No one's checking me, no one's asking for anything. The girls, the way that those students would interact with me would be so different. And then I would go to a public school down the street, and I'm having to go through a metal detector. I'm having to get searched before I even walk into the school. And when I come in, I have to sit on the table and my entire language has to code switch, or
Mhm.
you're not going to respect me because I'm an outsider. I
Mhm.
recognize this. I understand this. And I've gotten some of those kids to commit to our school because they felt seen in that
Mhm.
place. So, to your point, what happens when someone comes in and teaches or speaks to them in a language that they understand?
Yeah.
Like, that makes sense for their existence. And it's not happening in schools. Black and brown communities are more communal, so like
Mhm.
group things work best for us. We're more conversational. So like I need to talk to you about this topic. Don't talk at me and ask me to regurgitate it. I need to be able to dialogue with you about this topic. Like, and it's not, you can't just slap a band-aid on it and be like, "Oh, well, you just have some money to go somewhere else," because all the kids are not gonna thrive in that environment either. And then what happens when that kid goes? They got the voucher, cool, they got the scholarship. They can graduate with insert Saint wherever as the name of the school that they graduated from that makes them competitive to schools, maybe. And
Yeah.
then what happens? And you have the added layer of it's actually the kids from the hood who are probably going to get more money to go to college than the kid who took the voucher and went to the private school because now the college thinks, oh, they had the resources to go to the private school. They don't need as much money. This has literally happened to
Mhm.
people that I know personally who, in hindsight, they're like, I wish my mama would have never sent me to that school because
Yeah.
I didn't have the money to pay for college despite the need. It's so layered. It's so
Yeah.
deep, and I am trying not to boil the ocean.
Hey, sometimes the ocean needs to boil a little bit. But but I mean that brings me back to a point I made earlier though, in that you take these students that come from a place where learning is communal and there is that back and forth, and you're able to converse with your teacher and learn that way, and then you stick them in that private school situation, and I can bet you those private school teachers are not going to like that, and they're going to say, why are you mouthing off, why are you talking back to me? And it's like, no, 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 this is a learning, this is a strategy, this is a learning
Yeah.
strategy that's necessary, and some people learn better that way, but then they're going to be penalized because of how they learn.
Yeah, and we're a call and response culture. What do you mean I can't talk back to you while you're talking? Like, what? We yell at the movie. Like, they can't even hear us, and we're gonna talk back. Like, this is just a part of culture, and that's what I loved in the theater. I started doing a lot of Black theater, and I would always have these inserts in my programs that would be from the director being like, "Talk back to the actors.
Hmm.
Talk, enjoy," because theater etiquette says you can't say anything. Don't distract the actors. Don't do the thing. And there would literally be announcements in the shows that I was in or that I was working on, or even the shows that I would just go to. That's like, no, no, this is our space. Talk back to them. They can handle it. They're not going to break
Yeah.
character. If something crazy is happening, yell back, engage with the room. And the energy in the room would be so different and felt so
Mm.
safe and like comforted. So me talking back to you is not disrespect.
Mm-mm.
It's actually a form of respect, but you have these cultural differences. And I think a proper distribution of resources as well as intentional cultural competency is what schools need, not
Yeah.
a bunch more private schools. And don't even get me started on how organizations can now start voucher schools like the Heritage Foundation, who wrote Project 2025. The Heritage Foundation decided to take its resources and start popping up K through 12 schools all over the United States. What do you think is going to happen to the indoctrination of your children?
It's almost like what was happening in the 1930s in Germany. Huh.
Wow, so many parallels to 1930 Germany.
It's
Crazy
almost
how
like
that
they just took a playbook and were like, let's just use this.
wow, that is yeah. Anybody talk to Reagan? Like, I mean, just there's so much. There's so much. Project 2025 is just a remake anyway of, but
Well,
I love.
and I mean, to your point as well, that was something that I had to kind of unlearn when I started doing drag and came out and was in queer spaces, because I grew up as a classical musician. I was in orchestra, I was going to concerts and the ballet and the opera and learning to sit very still and stay completely silent. And if you say anything, you're going to get kicked out and you're going to lose your $100 that you spent on that ticket.
Yeah.
So you better pay attention. You better be dressed up. And then I get into drag, and all of a sudden I'm up there performing, and people are shouting things at me, and the host is talking on the mic over my music, and I'm just like, what is happening? I don't understand. Like, why is all of this happening while I'm performing? Don't you respect me? And it took me forever to realize, oh, they're responding in that way because they respect me, and because this is the thing. This is how you show that you're paying attention and that you're part of it. It's not just this silent crowd clapping at just the
Yeah.
right time for just the right length of time, and then you stop.
And then it's just like dead silence and it's move on to the next thing. No, it is that communal, and you see it pop up in, Latino communities, you see it pop up in indigenous communities, like that communal aspect, that welcoming you into the community is such a big part. And it is our education system, as old as it is still operating under antiquated ideologies. Like, it is still operating like it did when it started, and that is dumb. Why is our education system the only thing that hasn't evolved? Like,
Well, and I think that's why a lot of people are now, like myself, are more interested in becoming college professors than they are in becoming school teachers, is not because the education aspect is any different, but because at the college level, because there's more of an impetus on, if the student is failing, it's the student's fault. And that because of the way structures work and research works, you're able to make reasoned arguments to the board of trustees or to the school and say, hey, this is how I'm leading my class, and I'm doing it for this and this reason. Versus being a school teacher in high school or younger, you're beholden to a school board that's made up of people who maybe haven't had anything to do with school since they graduated, and politicians and angry parents, rather than people who are also academics that you can appeal to that side of them and say, no, 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 this is, I have a reason for this method.
yeah, absolutely. And we also have to think about, like, politicians are at the mercy of their constituents. And so if you have few, even if it's just a few, very loud, very angry individuals, you're gonna acquiesce just to shut them up, which often
Mm-hmm.
happens in education. If I think that if desegregation wasn't federal, we would have seen a lot of rollbacks, because there were a lot of angry mobs
Oh
and a
yeah.
lot of pressure on, and what we saw instead were vouchers. That was the
It's
only thing
almost
to do.
it's almost like other systemic things that we were like, yeah, we're emancipating, but here's the prison system, and it's for profit now. Here's sports, we'll make that another thing that we can do, and just hurt people for the fun of it, and not do anything about it.
Here's the
But
13th Amendment.
we're emancipating people, so there you go.
Yeah, emancipation, except if they're in prison. So here's the 13th Amendment, and then we're just gonna turn slave masters into cops.
Hmm. Yeah, it makes total sense.
Complete sense. And I wrote a literature review for my last class that I was so freaking proud of, because I raked over the coals the what we're saying on how these systemic issues came up in education, so much so that I was like, I don't even know by the time I reached my page count if I had actually answered what he wanted to answer. I went hard, so hard on the historical piece of it, because we don't talk about it, and
Yeah.
because we talk about it, we're able to just move through these places. And I grew up in the second, our education system was so bad that we only went up against one other state for worst. It was either us or Mississippi. Like, we fought for the last place education system in the United States. So for all intents and purposes, me having all the degrees that I have, me getting a doctorate, me having the experiences that I have, like, statistically should not have happened.
Hmm.
Like, they statistically should, I am an outlier. I would get thrown out the bunch. Like, I should not exist, and that's a problem.
Hmm.
Like, it shouldn't be an outlier. It shouldn't be what?
No, you having the education that you have shouldn't be a revolutionary act.
Exactly.
It should just be normal.
It should be normal, and that, like, that enraged me in so many ways. It also is what empowered me in so many ways. Like, I have, thankfully always been aware of the privileges that I have, um, and what I've been exposed to, and I'm the first one to call my friends out on our privileges as well, because I do think that sometimes as being, hitting so many marginalized identities, we neglect to recognize that there are still areas in which we are privileged, and working with underprivileged, I would argue under-resourced youth,
Mm,
for so many years. I am like, these kids are freaking brilliant, and yet the battle to get even to where I am is so hard for them.
yeah.
um it's so difficult, and it's not their fault,
Yeah.
not their fault. And then fast forward to 2025, and we have the administration that we have. And I am like, will my research exist by the time that I want to go do it, as we are just deleting things left and right?
You know, fingers crossed.
Yep.
That's kind of how I'm living right now, especially today as we're learning about, certain battles that are occurring and wars that are starting. And I'm just sitting here with my fingers crossed, going, I'm just going to keep soldiering on and keep researching and keep finding these things that we can and will hopefully fix in the future. Because if I don't focus on these things, I'm just going to go crazy.
Absolutely, abso-freaking-lutely. And, being flexible enough to pivot. I originally was gonna do a doctorate of public policy because I could do more of a practitioner's research and do something that can be used in real time. And then I quickly realized that the Department of Education may not exist by the time I get here. I probably should make a pivot. And so
Yeah.
I literally, at the beginning of this year, shifted back into a PhD program, that contributes to the literature, as opposed to going into a system and being like, hey, let's do some research on what's going on in your place. Let's figure out what these issues is, and let's find a solution in real time that you then get to keep this research and apply it.
Yeah.
Would have been great. Did not make sense for me to graduate. That can be a life's work thing. So this part of this journey is also like pivoting so that the most individuals are positively impacted by what I'm doing.
I think that's an important thing to note too, is I think for so long PhDs especially have been kind of seen as these musty, sitting in a library. You get this degree because you don't want to talk to people and because all you can do is research. So, I mean, I even remember growing up, my mom being like, "Oh yeah, it was always terrible when it was the PhD students that had to take over a class to teach because they were good at was researching." And it's
Mhm.
like, okay, that may have been it. But as I'm starting to talk to more and more people now who have PhDs, I'm realizing that it's a lot of people who said there is no literature on these subjects. So I'm going to take 3 to 15 years of my life to
Right.
create this literature and then find ways to make sure that it's seen. I have yet to talk to a PhD student or a professor who is like, "Yeah, I just did it and it's sitting on a shelf and I've never touched it ever again in my life."
Yeah.
Like it's a living and breathing degree now, and that's so exciting to me.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And it's funny to witness how hard the older PhDs are trying to push to separate themselves, as we see an uprise
Mm,
of doctoral programs as opposed to
yeah.
PhDs. You have your EdDs, which were like, what am I getting a research degree in education for? I want to do the stuff in education, the rise of the EdD.
Yeah.
But it's been like, EdDs and then everyone PhDs. And now I'm finding out all these other insert Ds are
Yeah.
existing. Like all of these programs, and my school is big on it too. They just started another doctorate program because they're trying to distinguish them from the PhDs. And I think, to your point, PhDs are becoming they're research practitioners. Like,
Mm,
they want to contribute to the literature, but they also want to do the work. They don't want to just sit in a stuffy room doing the research only. They want to
Yeah.
see their research be used in real time. Like they're scholar practitioners, and I think that that's beautiful.
It's very much we're seeing the like superheroification of the archivists.
Exactly.
Remember those movies, The Librarian? That's what we are now.
That's hilarious. But yeah, no, literally.
um,
Literally.
okay, so let's move on to I have a question from the audience, and I'm very curious what your answer to this will be.
Oh gosh.
Um, so at justin.0.g asks, what is your opinion on homeschooling? I love that lean back play with the hair. Like, how am I gonna play this one?
And this is why people like the visual part of podcast. Because I know my nonverbals just said so much. Um, how do I feel about homeschooling? Okay, here's the thing. I'm for it, actually. Um, asterisk. Because I don't believe that everyone's mom is equipped to be their teacher.
Yeah,
I am not of the mind that Susie Q from down the street should be doing their child's sole education. Now, when they're younger, because I think that we, up until probably about fourth grade, really should focus more on the social and social emotional building of our kids than no, and like basic math and reading, but like they don't need to be doing algebra at 7. Like I just don't agree with that.
what? What?
Like I just don't need you to figure out what X means at 7 years old.
Or
But can
ever,
you count?
honestly.
Fair enough. But can you count, right? Like,
Mm,
do you know how much money someone gave you on your birthday? Can you count that with me? Like very basic arithmetic. That I do think a parent or a guardian can easily do, assuming that they can do that for themselves. But traveling the world, engaging with students, other kids, like learning how to exist as a human because they've only been a human for 5 years. Like those things, I think absolutely a parent can do. I believe that once they hit late elementary, middle school, there needs to be someone who understands like the pedagogical aspect of teaching. So a retired teacher, homeschooling, absolutely.
yeah.
Someone who left the education system because of the bureaucratic red tape, but decided to be like, I can homeschool 10 neighborhood kids at my house every day. Yes, cool.
Mm,
I just don't believe that homeschooling, as we often see it, is setting kids up for success.
yeah,
I'm also one who believes that at a certain age, those kids need to go to school for the social aspect
yeah.
of school. I had friends who were homeschooled all through K through 12, and when they got to college, baby was weird. Love him. He was weird. It took him a while.
Hmm.
We had to teach him, how to be social, but he also was blessed to have friends who were like, "You cool. We just got to work on some things here so that you survive in the real world once we graduate here because there's no one teaching you at that point.
Yeah.
And so there were things that, he and all his siblings were homeschooled, and I was like, God bless you. Let's deal with some of this awkwardness, baby. Love you. That it's the social aspect of it that I think is heavily important. Now, a homeschool kid who plays sports somewhere who's getting a balance may have a different outcome. But I think when it comes down to it, when it comes to homeschooling, I think that the educator matters. And I don't believe that your parents or guardian are always the best um to do that. I believe in my case, if my parents had decided to either of them or my grandparents had decided to homeschool me, I don't know that I would have ever left Louisiana. And I mean that with love, but they haven't.
Mm.
My grandfather was military and he still brought everybody back. And then the family stayed there and have literally never left. We have generations on that bayou what? And so love y'all. No. I don't think I would have uh I would have left. I don't think I would have had the exposure, right? It was because I was in school that my school was like, "Hey, we can go to close up and you can go to DC for an entire week and do this program with thousands of kids from across the country." Yes, please.
Mm.
It was my school being like, Spanish teacher is taking a group of kids to Spain and France over spring break. If you want to go? Like, and I understand, privileges are there, money had to be a thing. Your girl worked hard for that money, but I was determined to go. If
Yeah.
I was home, I don't know that I would have had that exposure personally. So people have their limited experiences can impact a kid's ability to expand
Hmm.
beyond what their parent or guardian has been exposed to themselves. I think school allows for kids to meet people of different walks and have different experiences and have different exposures that better sets them up for life. Yeah, we'll leave it at that.
I mean, this is where I out myself as a K through 12 homeschooler. Um, I was homeschooled all the way through, and I don't disagree with anything you said. I was very, very privileged. Like I said, having a mom who was a former teacher in the Seattle Public
Right.
School District, a father who's a judge. Um,
Uh,
I had a very well-rounded start to my education. And then as myself and my sister got older, I was also very privileged to grow up in Washington State, and Washington State is very, very into helping homeschoolers. Like it's probably the best state in the union for homeschooling because of the
Sure.
resources they offer. We had conferences that we went to every year that sold curriculum, and you could
Yeah.
go see like 20 different curriculum and say, okay, what pieces of each one is going to work for my kid. Um,
That's
we started going to resource centers. So like I took Latin starting at I think the age of 8 or 9 because there was a resource center and there was a teacher there that was teaching Latin. And then we joined a co-op, and me and my sister were taking classes from our friends' parents who had master's degrees and doctorates in their fields of study. So I was learning calculus from someone who had degrees in calculus, and learning
yeah.
English from people who had degrees in literature. And so uh, I would say I had a very privileged background in terms of homeschooling. And yet when I got to college, I had been around people. I graduated with a class of, I think it was a class of like 40 people. And I got to college and had no idea how to talk to people. I was
Yeah.
an asshole, not because I was trying to be an asshole, but because I didn't understand how communities worked and how you met new people and how you figured out how people communicated with each other. So I would just go in and be like, this is how I talk to people. And they're like, that is not how you talk to people.
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
Yeah. I think that the resources you had, that's incredible, but there's nothing that replaces the experiences of being on a campus, like
yeah.
with other students and having to learn to navigate. Like, I will never invalidate someone's middle school drama. Do I roll my eyes every time my kids start telling me stories? Absolutely. But that is your entire world. You're 12.
Mhm.
That is very
Yeah.
real, but you need to learn how to handle this like stupid 12-year-old heartbreak. So when your heart is actually broken as an adult, it's
Oh
like
boy.
little things like that that just it it builds character.
Oh, I still find little things that I do that I'm just like, that's not how anyone else handles that. And I'm pretty sure that's a homeschooler thing. And I need to take a step back and breathe for a second and find a new way to handle this situation.
Understandable. Understandable.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
good question.
Okay. So yeah, that was a great question. So this brings us to my favorite segment of the whole thing, which is my synthesis questions. Do, do, do. So I'm going to ask you a series of questions, and I
Okay.
don't want you to think too hard about them. I just want you to answer them to the best of your abilities. So
All
question number one, what is your typical executive dysfunction and or rest day activity?
right. My nails. I
Yes.
do my own nails.
Oh,
Um,
you do your own nails?
yeah, I literally did these because I didn't want to do homework 2 days ago. Which is why I'm laughing so hard because I didn't have it in me. I kept trying. The computer was open. I was really trying to work and it just was not
Yeah.
happening. And I was like, you're dysregulated. You're exhausted. You don't, but you can't go to sleep because you got to get this done. So I popped on a Disney show and I sat in my nail station and I did a full set. And then by the time I was done, I was so calm. I was good. I was regulated. We were ready to go. So yeah, my nails are a big one of my executive dysfunction. Yeah. Yeah.
That's amazing. Um, what is your favorite setting for working on your research?
I like coffee shops. My my ADHD likes the sounds, like the ambient noises around of a coffee shop and enough movement that like I can hyper focus on my
Mm.
assignment. But like there's enough movement because if it's too quiet, I hear everything, the lights buzzing, the
Oh
like
yeah.
I can't.
Oh my
So
God.
I can't like, and so if I know there's noise and I know there's movement, it's expected, I don't get distracted by it.
Mm.
Now my little quirky one is there are like 10 of us in my church who are all getting doctorate degrees. It's so weird and random. But about 6 of us have gotten together and kind of made a little group because we're all in online programs and don't have cohorts. And we discovered that the middle ground between all of us is a Wegmans grocery store.
Oh, okay.
And it has hot food, like a grill and stuff, pizza, a salad bar, but then it's also a grocery store. So it's like you have a giant kitchen behind you while also having like a bar that has coffee and wine, depending on how you're feeling.
That would
And
be
then
so
enough
dangerous.
traffic. It's so bad in the best
I think I'm
way. But
just gonna pop up for a quick snack. That's your
no,
20th sack today. I don't
yeah,
care.
yeah, the amount of Wegman charges on my card was ridiculous when we were doing it like multiple times a week. I was like, girl, eat lunch before you come. They also have a microwave, so you could bring your dinner and
Oh
just
my
eat
God.
if you want. So you don't have to spend money. But like that's like my favorite quirky thing because I have spent so much of my time researching in the like seated area of a Wegmans grocery store.
I love
Like they might get a shout out on my dissertation.
that. What is one thing an advisor has told you that has stuck with you? And this can be good or bad.
Oh, what is one thing? It's actually the reason I almost transferred from my school. Um, and I had the dean of the college actually tell me that my education policy research was too education heavy and that I may need to consider whether or not my topic was appropriate for my um, degree program or if I should consider transferring to another program or switching my topic.
That makes no sense.
None whatsoever. I my original question was structured in a way that really highlighted the academic outcomes of
Mm.
students, and they felt that that was too education heavy, even though it was policy centered. It was the impact of these policies on academic outcomes whatever. They didn't like it. It was too, they were like, you need to change your dependent variable or you may not get approved when it's time to submit for your research. And so I applied to another school. I applied to an ed D, went through the whole process. I got in. They wouldn't take any transfer credits and I would have to start over and I just couldn't do it. So I switched my question to essentially ask the same question, but put the dependent variable in the policy realm. But that has stuck with me because it just highlighted to me how pretentious policy people can be. That you didn't feel as though my question honored the policy side enough while you as an institution decided to put an education policy program in the government school instead of inside of the education school. But I digress.
That's a big old oop.
So that sits with
um,
me. I definitely have a big
yeah,
like when I walk across that stage, I I don't know.
that'll be a nice little wink to that
Yep.
to the dean. Like, I still did it.
And she will be the one passing out the diplomas. Can't wait.
So good. If you could choose any other area of research, what would you choose and why?
Arts education, hands down.
Mm,
If I could choose any other area, I would focus more so on the fact that the arts need to stay in the schools. Like
mm,
real bad, like real bad. I own a performing arts company that does supplemental arts education for schools. Like I literally go teach theater or dance. My company does to schools who do not have the funds to hire a teacher to do the arts in their school, but they have grant funding for after school programs, and that's how they supplement the education. I would do research on the effects of not having versus having on the social emotional needs of adults. I would love to do
yeah.
research on adults who grew up in the arts and who didn't.
You know, we need some justice for the theater kids.
100%.
Who is one other academic whose research you really admire?
Oh my. I would have to say Patricia Hill Collins, Dr. Patricia Hill Collins, has nothing to do with the research that I'm doing currently. But I did do a lot. I studied her research quite a bit in my first master's degree, and the way that she breaks down Black feminist thought
Mm,
and the way that she has given me the language that I needed, that I do use now to talk about lived experiences as a form of research. Um, and the fact that she to this day stands 10 toes down on it. And she's like, there is nothing you are going to be able to do to convince me that someone's lived experience is not as, if not more important than your Google search. And I love
mm,
that for us.
I love that. Um, what is a question that you've never been able to answer?
Ooh, what is a question I've never been able to answer? Why? I get asked a lot because I do a million different things and I have so many different hats. Like, why this topic? Why over another topic? Why this program over another program? Why get a PhD instead of just doing the work and I'm just like, it just feels right. Like I don't know, I don't have an answer for you. I don't know. This just feels like I know this is supposed to be. But anyone who has looked for a concrete answer from me, I'm like, you just gonna have to take this for what it is, dog. I don't know. Like, I am just, why are you doing to yourself? I don't know. Every night that I want to
Mhm.
cry on these things, I just know I'm supposed to. I can't answer why. I don't have an answer. It's just, yeah.
It is what it is.
It is what it is. Yeah, so that question I have fumbled through a multitude of responses, and I think I give something that, they may find sufficient in the moment, but in the grand scheme of things, I'm like, "I don't know, girl. We're just here."
And then the last question is, what font do you wish you could present your research in?
Oh my God. Don't hate me, America. Comic Sans.
This interview's done.
For that reaction alone.
See, you like to stir the pot. You just want to turn that table over.
I do. I really do. I did not use Comic Sans, but for my research proposal for my first master's, I used memes. I literally
I
filled it
love that.
I filled it with GIFs and memes. And when I presented the fact that I was like, Black women's research, like lived experience. It's just research, and you're gonna have to trust me on that. I had a GIF of Aladdin reaching for Jasmine's hand and going, "Do you trust me?" Like, I know I pissed my advisor off.
Yeah.
I know I did. I don't care. I'm
Yeah.
entertained by this. So I think Comic Sans, for the simple fact that, like, it would be so cringy, but I need you to feel how cringy it is that we're in this predicament anyway.
Mm.
I feel like there's a
Honestly, I
metaphor.
love that. It's very postmodern.
Thank you.
Well,
That is
thank you so very much for taking time out of your day to talk to me. This has been such an enjoyable conversation, and I really I need the world to hear these things that we have said today.
yeah. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was super fun. And I love the way these conversations are being had, because initially I
Mm.
was like, a podcast about a bunch of scholars. This should be interesting. But I love it. I have really enjoyed it, and I agree. I think people need to hear these
Mm.
conversations because they're not reading these articles.
Oh no. No, no, no.
So thank
I'm
you.
barely reading the articles that I'm supposed to read.
Yeah. No, that part.
All right, and we will talk to you all later. Bye. I really hope that you were just as uplifted by that conversation as I was, and just as encouraged that there are people looking for new ways to educate children, to bring solid, creative, communal learning experiences to everyone, not just to the affluent and not just to those who happen to live in the right districts. So I urge you to follow Kelcey on her road towards this degree, and to look more into how public schools are run, because I think a lot of people don't understand the history of public schools in the United States. So I would encourage you to look a little bit more into that, because it's not the greatest history. I guess we could guess that, but and just see how you can get involved, because we need more educators, and we need students to be educated in spaces that work with them rather than against them. So thank you so much to Kelcey for sitting down with me and having this conversation. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to also following along on your PhD journey and beyond. If you would like to submit questions to our guests, please feel free. Follow us on Instagram at HypothesisPod. That's on Instagram at HypothesisPod, and you can DM us your questions. Or you can email us at podcasthypothesis@gmail.com. That's that's podcasthypothesis@gmail.com. You also can submit an audio question to us, record in a nice quiet space, and keep it brief. You can do that on speakpipe.com/hypothesispodcast. Please follow all of our social media accounts. Again, our Instagram is at HypothesisPod. You can also find me at Ira A. McIntosh. And then you can also find me on TikTok at The Gay Ethnographer. Please also follow our Substack. That's where all the video and audio podcasts will be posted, as well as all of the articles that we discuss in each episode will be posted with the audio and video files. So check out the Substack. That's iramcintosh.substack.com. Please subscribe, rate, review, and share with your friends. And please remember, when you are listening to the podcast, to download the podcast. If you don't download it, it won't show up on our statistics, and those statistics are what help us get paid. So if you would like to support this podcast, please rate, review, subscribe, and download each episode when you listen to it. And of course, share with your friends. Nothing works better than word of mouth, and especially around subjects of academia, word of mouth is extremely important. So in order to get as many people listening to this podcast as possible, not just for my own benefit, but also to make sure that people have access to this information and know their opportunities for education, please share this with your friends. I would be so eternally grateful. So please, let's fight misinformation together. Have a wonderful day and go read a book.